𝗍𝗵𝗃𝗃 threw it to 𝗍𝗯𝘂𝐂𝐺. 𝗍𝗯𝘂𝐺 ran and squared it to 𝗂𝗃, and 𝗂𝗃 scored. And then all of a sudden our bench is cleared. Everybody swearing at the referee. It was just straight carnage. So at one point, I was getting carried off the field by some United fans who thought that I was Quinny and I'd just scored the winner. Leicester got relegated and we played United the next year at Bramall Lane, and I got booed by all the fans, and because I was a traitor. The ringleaders to all the booing were basically all my pals in the stand who would run down and were calling me scum, so it was good banter.
At least you can tell the Sheffield United fans now that you weren't a traitor and to blame Neil Warnock.
This is the Sheff United Way podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Sheff United Way. My name is Hal. Very soon you will see the face of Nick, and it is our pleasure to welcome another guest, a man who played for Sheffield United towards the end of the 90s. He was part of the Brucey take-em-off saga at Highbury, represented England at under-18 and under-21 level, and would play in the top flight with Derby County, featuring in that Rams' famous 1-0 win at Old Trafford against Manchester United. He's now a head coach working in America. Lee Morris, welcome to the Sheff United Way.
How are we doing, lads? Nice to see you both.
Not bad, thanks. How are you, mate?
Doing all right, thank you. Not too bad at all.
Good. I am boiling. Nick is boiling. I've got my biggest fan just behind me. So if you're wondering why we are recording this, Nick, aren't we, during a heat wave?
We are. When this goes out in 4 months' time, no one's going to have a clue what we're going on about.
They'll remember.
Absolutely. So, Lee, first up, for younger viewers, can you tell us about your father, Colin, and his footballing career?
I was lucky enough to grow up watching United in the 80s. He was there, I think it was 82 to 88, just the start of the 𝗍𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 reign when he sold him to Scarborough. I grew up. There was my dad and Keith Edwards were kind of like the legends of the time and scoring a load of goals. And I think my dad used to cross it and Keith used to edit in. And I grew up during that era. It was. I was little, can't remember an awful lot about it, but my dad tells me an awful lot about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine. Did you always want to be a footballer?
Growing up watching him, that was pretty much all that was ever on my agenda, really. I was all right at school, but I probably would have been better if I didn't think I was going to play football. And so I was around it all the time from when he was playing at United, and then he went to be assistant manager with Warnock at Scarborough, and then he was manager at Scarborough for a bit, then manager at Bridgetown for a little bit. So as I was growing up, I was either watching him playing or watching him coach and being around training sessions and all of that. So it was just my life from as young as I can remember, really. It was watching and being part of it all.
And you started at that famed York City School of Excellence, which has brought through some really good players. I mean, what was that like for a young aspiring footballer at that time, Lee?
Well, funnily enough, there was during that time Rich Creswell, who I think was at United for a little bit, John O'Greening that went on was at Man United, and me and Curtis Woodhouse was there as well. We used to travel down there together. So it was about an hour away from my house. We lived right out in the country in East Yorkshire, so there wasn't really much football around us as such. Hull and York were the two closest, Scarborough and Bridgetown. And then obviously Sheffield was a bit further afield. So I was travelling to go to get coached from a young age, but there was the coach at the time was a guy called Ricky 𝗍𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 that ended up being at Man United for a while on their first team coaching staff, and then was Scotland national teams coaching staff and stuff. So even at like under 12s and 13s, I had some good coaches that, ended up going on and having real good careers. So I was quite lucky with how I grew up to begin with, to be honest.
Yeah, and of course, Ricky would end up at Sunderland as their manager as well. So good stock, and you would have got decent training. And we've heard of one or two of those other players. I remember seeing Creswell and John O'Greening actually play for York, and there was a lot of hype around them at the time. Don't know what happened to that Curtis Woodhouse guy.
disappeared into obscurity.
Just disappeared. And I would imagine keeps himself very quiet.
He wasn't confident enough, was his ultimate downfall, I think. So
So how do we go from that York City School of Excellence to the move to Sheffield United?
Well, it'll have been my dad, really. I think he always kept strong ties. We used to come and watch United. It was a good era after he'd left. All of a sudden they took off and Dave Bassett came in. And so we'd come and catch a game every year or so. And so he just stayed in touch. And I think somewhere along the way, they'd kind of asked about me and my brother if either of us were any good. And it resulted in us coming over to Sheff U, and he brought Curtis with him as well. And that was kind of the link. And then obviously when I came, that's where I wanted to be. So it just kind of like I came in and settled in pretty quickly into the team. And that was it from day one. There was a decision to be made. I think it was about under 14s on, do you want to stay at York? Do you want to? I think Leeds and Newcastle had kind of come in with a little bit of interest, and the scouts had invited us up there. But I never went. I kind of wanted to stay at United, and that was kind of like how it all just settled in for me.
So were you a Blade right from the get-go then?
So, yeah, I mean, because I grew up watching them, and, I've got all my photos when I was little are all in the Sheffield United kits and stuff like that. And I was thinking the other day about, there was the yellow, there was a yellow one with like the red and white. I don't know if you will remember that. I think it was Arnold Lever. Mm-hmm. And so that was my favorite kit growing up when I was here.
The McDonald's kit.
I think, it wasn't great. You're probably right on the colours.
That's what we called it.
Is that what it was? But it was that was like, I loved that kit. So I was always a Sheffield United fan growing up. And, obviously with my dad being such a hero, we went back and walking down Wembley Way and they were singing his name and stuff like that. And it all just clicked for me that I was going to be a Sheffield United fan. And then being an apprentice and growing up through the club just only really strengthened it for me. I just loved it.
Now, I think I know the answer to this, and I would certainly have my own guess. But if someone was to say, Lee, what was your best position and also your favourite position to play in, what would you say?
I liked being a striker. I wanted to
Everyone
be a
always says
forward.
that.
But I was quick and I was left-footed. So there weren't many of us around at that time. It was before the right wingers, the right footers playing on the left wing and coming in. It was run fast, cross it, and we'll have a big forward in the box who let it in. That was the era. So I was always kind of moved out to be a left winger, which wasn't my favourite position, but probably was my best position looking back now.
All right. Me and Hal did the exact same facial
expressions.
Didn't we? Yeah, we did. But that is true, though. Every winger wants to be a striker, pretty much. It's crazy how often you see that. What do you remember about your professional debut?
It was Wolves at home. I think we won 1-0. It was a big game, and both of us were like in playoff contention at the time. And Tony Daly was playing for them.
He was quick. He was very quick.
That was, he had grown up. He was at Villa for a while, and he was like England team, and he was a bit of a star. And so I can remember coming on and like kind of looking at him and thinking, oh my God, he's quick. And then we had a bit of a race and stuff. Apart from that, I can't remember an awful lot apart from being really, really nervous before I went on. And I think I've told you lads before, the introduction onto the field was Colin Morris's son, Lee Morris, is coming on. And I think that was about the biggest cheer I had in my career.
Oh, that's harsh.
That's harsh. No pressure then as well, legend son.
Yeah, I peaked at that moment.
Well, let's actually talk about a genuine go, because I'm sure you can pick another. What was your highlight of your time at Bramall Lane?
We had some, it was like a transition time. It was up and down at them times. So there was a few good ones. Scoring my first goal, first like professional goal. I think it was the fourth of a 4-1 win in like the Littlewoods Cup or something, I think it was, against Cardiff at home. it will have been in like the 88th minute, so most of the stadium will have cleared out at that point. And it was like 6 foot goalmouth scramble. I hooked it in with my right foot, and I ran off. It was like 𝗍𝗏𝗂 in the '82 World Cup. I ran off, like it was the most important goal in the world. But for me, that's a big memory of just your first professional goal is a big one, and then the big games were really for me were the Arsenal games and the Coventry night. I came on as sub on the Coventry night, and that was a big night that everybody during that era, everybody can remember that night. But for me,
it was my first ever giant kill, and I've said this on the channel so many times. My first time seeing Sheffield United beat a team from the division above. So like I said, everybody from our era remembers that night. It was fantastic.
And for those that don't, we're talking about a replay at home against Nottingham, against Coventry, that finished 1-1, went to penalty shootout, and we managed to get past what was then an incredibly in-form Premier League Coventry City.
Yeah, it was that was. I was lucky at the time. In the league, we'd have 3 subs, and in the FA Cup, we'd have 5 subs. So I was only getting on the benches for the FA Cup games when we needed extra players. In the league, I wasn't getting on the bench. So we needed a goal, and I came on with about 15 minutes to go. We wound up scoring, and for me, I was just so happy because it got extra time, and I get an extra half an hour on the pitch. So it was that was a hell of a night for me personally, that I got involved in such a big night, and winning on penalties. It was just a great night, really.
Did you stick your hand up for a penalty?
I don't think I was even consulted at the time as the
bizarre, isn't it?
The youngest.
That Roger Nielsen, who'd never scored, he'd only scored own goals. He's ahead. Not Lee.
It was. I might have taken one because I took him in the youth team, and I was pretty confident at the time. So I would probably have took one, but I think I've told you lads this before as well. When Quinny scored, me and him at the time had the same haircut, and I was just like a little bit shorter and a little bit skinnier than Quinny. So at one point, I was getting carried off the field by some United fans who thought that I was Quinny and I just scored the winner. So,
brilliant. Weren't you a little bit blonder?
A little bit blonder, but I had the same curtains at the time, and the quiff used to flip it back.
So, is that technically the answer? The highlight was being mistaken for Wayne Quinn.
In a nutshell, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Quinny told us about leading up to that penalty, and he said that it was Dean Saunders and not Graham Stewart, was it, Hal, who pinned him down and were like, do not change your mind, do not change your mind. There must have been some big characters back in those days, between like 97 and 99. Who were the big characters in the dressing room?
So, yeah, I mean, God, there was a lot of players came through the team at that time. It was like
huge turnover.
We had all of them. With Don Hutchinson, I remember, was just unbelievable the time he was here. Dean Saunders was one of the funniest people I'd ever been around. I was a young, shy kid, and being around him, he used to walk into hotel receptions and just do these loudest fart noises. It was just mental. It was. So
just saving him up all day.
Yeah, just bonkers. We had Bobby Ford was like just a quiet, lively.
I'm going to say fella. He weren't a big character. Him.
I like Bobby Ford a lot. He was real good with me. Was Bobby Ford, but Reg Olsworth, obviously, he was dead good. Being a young lad, I was scared to death of Simon Tracy. He was horrendous for the young lads. He was a proper nightmare. But
what did he do then, Simon Tracy? What?
We used to have to do. I was at the age where I'd be like the sub in the reserves, or the sub on the first team, and you have to warm the goalies up. And you just didn't want to do it. If you tried putting a cross in and you missed it, it was like the stadium, there weren't enough people in it. If it was a reserve game, there was nobody in the stadium, and all you'd have was him effing and blinding at the top of his voice at you. In the first team, he'd be doing it, and there'd be like a couple of thousand, so it was loud enough for everybody to hear and laugh at you. So he was just horrible. And so, yeah, but I mean, he bullied you, he made you better for it, you know. So yeah, going through that time, Fjortoft was there, Dean Saunders, Holdsworth. There was just a load of them that were
Paul
were
McGrath,
massive.
was he there then?
Who?
Paul McGrath.
Paul McGrath, yeah. When I was in my first year, Paul McGrath came through, yeah, but he very rarely trained. He only turned up for the game days, which is, living the dream. He was, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. What about 𝗏𝗏𝗃? Was he quiet?
𝗏𝗏𝗃 was a weird one. Can you remember when he ducked in the wall?
No. I mean, he's about 6'7". How does he even do that?
We were playing Oxford in the cup at home. I think we got beat 2-1. Oxford were like in the bottom division at the time. And he was built like a giant gorilla.
Like a Greek god, you could say.
Gently looped over the wall. And he turned his back and ducked out the way we got beaten. Yeah, that was controversial in the dressing room afterwards. He hadn't seen many of them fights in Greece before he came here, that's for sure.
Who were the ringleaders then in going for him?
Oh, it was just at the time we had like the blend of the Cockneys and then, the Scottish and the Northern, just everybody. It was mayhem. I wasn't ready for it. That team that got to the playoffs, we had some big characters that year that were really aggressive. I tell you, who was good that not many will talk about that often was Lee Sanford.
Oh, we love Lee Sanford. Nick and I are big fans.
God, he was brilliant that year, wasn't he? And
he was
he was aggressive as anything as well. Sandy was.
Yeah, no nonsense. I met Lee Sanford in Cardiff, and he came back to watch United in that unfortunately awful playoff final against Wolves. Such a nice guy, and we've got a lot of time for Sandy. Let's talk a little bit about your international experience, because whilst at United, I already mentioned in the introduction that you represented England at under 18 and under 21 level. So who can you remember being in those squads with you?
So the 21s was like a step up from the 18s. I remember that was like Steven Gerrard, Ashley Cole, Frank Lampard, Alan Smith was there. That was a hell of a team at that era. Jamie Carragher and Danny Mills, who's off the radio now on 5 Live. That was kind of like, that was my era of a group of players. Peter Crouch was in there a couple of times. And I was kind of like, I was in the squads. I travelled with quite a few squads and just never got into the 18s, never got dressed and stuff, which was probably about right because there was just some better players than me in there. But then when you look at Curtis keeping out a couple of them lads along the way, that was like a hell of an achievement for him, really.
Curtis was some player. I think a lot of people forget when Curtis was interested in football, he was almost impossible to get past. He never, ever shirked a challenge. He always won the ball. And I think a lot of people do, because towards the end of his career, he had other interests. He really was a fantastic player, great left foot. So
he changed his game, When he first started out in the youth team and was getting into the first team, he was like a little number 10. And he had unbelievable vision. He had a brilliant left foot. In the youth team, he used to score a load of goals and get a load of assists and was like really creative. And then somewhere along the way, he got more and more aggressive, more and more determined, and wanted to turn himself into like this fighting dog. He was
a terrier, yeah.
But that originally, the first few years, that wasn't really his game. He was more of a creator, and he had like brilliant vision. His passing was unbelievable. And that ain't really what people will remember him for, because he could get a red card, he could boot people. But in his younger days, he was a really creative, skillful player. And then he kind of changed his game to take it out of it, which was, he could have gone a long way, could Curtis, if he had his head screwed on.
You could see it.
That was going to be my next question. If Curtis didn't kind of have his head turned by boxing, where do you think he would have got to?
I mean, God, he could have gone as low as he wanted, couldn't he, really, Curtis? Because he wasn't staying out the pubs. But I don't know. It's one of them that I remember at the time that when they were trying to sell everybody, I was one of the ones, and Curtis was one of the ones that they could make money out of. And so my move went through to Derby And I think that was kind of like at a time where they really needed the money. And I don't know if my move stopped Curtis's move from going through, but Rangers were really into him. And he talks about it quite a lot on Twitter now about Rangers. And him and his agent went up there. I think they had pretty much everything agreed. And then it fell through. So I don't exactly know. But if he'd have gone there, I mean, given more money and more hero status, he could have really gone off the rails at Rangers.
Not propelled himself, gone off.
Could have been a hell of a time doing it, though, couldn't he?
Yep.
Oh yeah, I would not have blamed him whatsoever either. So
it's a shame. It's a shame because he really could have gone on the way he started up until that sort of 20, 21 age. He was tracking to be a real star.
Agreed.
And then somewhere along the way, he kind of just got lost in it all, I think.
It would have been nice to ask him about that, wouldn't it, Hal?
If only. Yeah. We won't talk about Curtis and direct
we'll
messages. We'll leave that.
No. We'll not talk about him agreeing to do a podcast and then never messaging us back. We'll not talk about anything.
We'll not talk about that.
No, we won't. We won't. We even brought it up. I don't even remember.
Yeah.
Now talking about Curtis, I'm assuming he was one of your big mates in the dressing room. Who else were some of your big mates in the dressing room?
So yeah, I mean, we were the young lads coming through. So it obviously Curtis was the one I used to hang about with the most. Him and Quinny, and then Sean Derry was kind of big during my time there as well. 𝗍𝗲 came in as another one of the young lads. So really, it was like us four that I felt used to knock about the most when I came into the first team. And that was kind of like our little crew because we were the young lads. And then Bobby Ford was pretty young during that time as well. He was a bit quieter and a bit more out there. But that was kind of like my little group that we used to hang about and have a little night out here and there with.
Nice. Yeah. Sean Derry was a bit classic, wasn't it? Blades at Business at the time was buy high, sell low. We managed to sell him for less than we bought him for after we made him a better player and he was playing regular first team football. Bizarre.
Great business.
Tell you, he had the best career for being one of the most limited players I ever knew, did 𝗍𝗲. He was just unbelievable. Attitude, fitness, everything. He went on. I keep seeing him on TV now as the assistant at Palace with Patrick Vieira. It makes me chuckle quite a lot, that does. He's where he is 𝗍𝗲. But he's gone on and done well, the lad, bless him.
I think then you named quite a few lads that like to drink. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that was our... It was kind of Yorkshire in the late 90s, wasn't it? Early 2000s. It was, as a club, I think I grew up in the era where it was, part of it was, finish training on a Tuesday, go and have a night out and then, sweat it off on the Thursday morning and do the same Saturday night out. Monday morning, you're running, all of that. That was just kind of like the era that was coming to an end. So, yeah, we had a good crew for a little while.
Wow. I sometimes wonder, Nick, you know how boring I am. If I had like Curtis Woodhouse's ability with my boring fitness, no drinking, only drinking water and eating protein mentality, who knows what would have happened? But he's here for a good time, not a long time.
I don't know, man. I track your sandwiches all over Twitter, man. I'm always interested in that.
God, not another one.
Lee, that's the only day of the week I have carbs. Anyway, we've strayed here. So do you still keep in touch with former teammates or coaches or any staff at Sheffield United?
You have a bit of banter with Curtis every now and again. The lad who I'm in the club with here, me and him were apprentices at Sheffield together, and now he's kind of like my boss here at South Carolina United. So we all grew up together in East Yorkshire, playing for East Yorkshire, East Riding, and we're all apprentices at Sheffield. So we have a bit of banter between us, and then
well, who is
Sean
that?
Derry,
give him a shout out.
A lad called Rob Strickland.
I recognise the name, yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, he went. He apparently, instead of turning professional at 18, he chose to come to America and get an education.
Of course,
is the line. But yeah, still hear from Curtis and Quinny every now and again, and stay in touch with 𝗍𝗲 as well. So yeah, there's only a handful. There's so many people from so many clubs. As a journeyman footballer that I was, that you kind of lose track along the way of a few.
And talking about journeyman footballers, is that a segue? I hope
No,
it is.
not at all.
Maybe journeyman footballer, but definitely not a journeyman manager. Chris Wilder, your former teammate. What are your thoughts on him, Lee?
It was a heartbreaker, wasn't it, when he went? I didn't understand the thought process behind any of that, and it was real disappointing because you would have just thought they would have supported him more. And in my lifetime, this was the best era that I've ever seen Sheffield. And I mean, it was disappointing. It was in the COVID years that the fans weren't in there to be able to witness what was an unbelievable time. So I didn't think it was the right time for him to go, and it's heartbreaking to see him somewhere else now. But it'd be great to see him back one day, I think.
Oh, never say never. Tell us about the managers you played under during your time at Bramall Lane. We're talking here from youth team to first team.
So 𝗍𝗍𝗍 obviously was the youth team coach. John Dungworth and Russell Slade were the youth team coaches when we started out, and then we had, God, who was it? Nigel Spackman was manager for a while.
Oh, I'd like to know about Nigel Spackman, because we all loved Nigel Spackman, but then
Mark Patterson didn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Then Mark Patterson said some not nice things about him. So what's your thoughts on Nigel Spackman?
He was great with me. I mean, I was very young, just trying to come into the team. He was the manager on my debut, I seem to recall. And so he was just the nicest man in the world, so far as I could see. But I was a very, very young kid during all of that time period that he was in charge. So he was good with me. But I was too young to kind of like have formed opinions on who was good gaffer, who was a bad gaffer at the time. And so I kind of just went along with it all. And I was sad to see him go because I felt like he liked me and he might pick me more.
He blooded youth. That's one thing that Nigel Spackman did. We couldn't deny him that, because Howard Kendall had seemed fairly reluctant in some cases to blood some of the young youth players. There was players that we didn't even know about. And then suddenly Sunderland at home, first game, it's like, oh, who are these young lads? And they turn out to be, fantastic. You can't really imagine a better debut than Wayne Quinn, except you can, because it happened on the same day with 𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗂.
Yeah, I remember watching that game
What a
in
game.
the stands that day. I mean, Howard obviously had a lot more money than Nigel. I think he had a bit of a transition time, didn't he, where he had to blood players and he had to sell players, and we had all of them go out. And that's a little bit, when we ran out of money, that's pretty much why me and Curtis got an opportunity so young, because there wasn't an awful lot else behind the first team that was getting sold off. So in one aspect, that kind of helped me. And then when he went, Tomo came in. Steve Thompson was manager for a couple of months, and that was a weird time. And I mean, Adrian Heath was the one that ended up selling me. We had some big names, really, didn't we, during that period? But yeah, I mean, Nigel was probably the one. Him and Steve Bruce were the best for me. And I loved Steve Bruce. I was disappointed when he just got let go at Newcastle, because I'd love to see him with a budget. If he had some money, I wonder what he would do. But he was good for me during them early years, Well,
he's had a very good managerial career, really, you've got to say. But it almost feels like two different people, because when he was the Sheffield United manager, he certainly was a little bit fitter than he is these days. Anyway, but
he was still playing.
He was, to be fair, he was still playing.
Break.
Do you want to run us through the Brucey take him off game and just tell us what happened in that whole melee?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I didn't know an awful lot about it. It was me that went down with cramp. So Ned kicked the ball out so that I could get attention. And this was like the first season of like that sportsmanship, where normally if someone went down injured, you'd just play on. And then they kind of brought in this thing where you kick the ball out and then the team would give the ball back to you. But that was pretty new. So I went down with cramp. Ned kicked the ball out and Arsenal were meant to give us the ball back. And it was Ray Parlour threw it to Overmars. We were all stood still. Overmars ran and squared it to Carnu. And Carnu scored. And I thought it was Overmars' fault because he'd run it down. But they were saying it was Carnu's first game in England. And he didn't know that we were meant to give it back. So there was all kinds of excuses going on.
It's got to be Overmars's fault, surely.
He could still have given it back, couldn't he? He could have got it from Carnu, gone, right, Carnu doesn't know the setup, I'll pass it back to Alan Kelly, and on we go.
There you go.
But well, Ray Parlour threw it back to Alan Kelly, surely.
Yeah, that was the theory. I think he thought that Overmars was going to kick it back, but then obviously we'd all stopped. But to be honest with you, I was like kind of limping off and sitting in the back of the dugout. So I kind of I hadn't seen any of it. I heard the roar. I thought they'd scored, and then all of a sudden our benches cleared. Everybody swearing at the referee. It was just straight carnage. And I was sat there wondering what was going on. So Brucey was calling us off the field, and thankfully they didn't go off the field, and we played it out and got the replay.
Well, sort of, because we lost the game, didn't we? 2-1, and then Wenger offered us the second game, which I think you scored in the second game, didn't you?
Did, yeah, I did. But we were 11 minutes away from getting the replay back at Bramall Lane.
We've done them.
They wouldn't have wanted that, on a Tuesday night in January, February time. That would not have been good for them. So it was like a half-hearted replay, wasn't it?
Very, very rare. I don't think it's ever happened again anywhere.
No, it never before or since, I don't think, for bad sportsmanship. So it was, that's like, I played well in both games. So I just really enjoyed it there. And first game, I tried swapping shirts with Tony Adams after the game. It's the first and only time I tried swapping shirts with anyone. I went up and I was like, hey, Tony, can we swap shirts? And he looked at me and went, nah, piss off. That was it.
I was going to say, how did you try and swap shirts? Surely he would have just given it to you, but not Tony Adams.
He didn't want my shirt, that's for sure. So,
did you not try and get anyone else's then?
After that, never.
Oh,
one and done.
Wounded.
You should have asked someone else. You might have got one.
Well, I'd say I interviewed Martin Keown, and we fell out after about 5 seconds. So I'm not sure you should have tried anyone else on that back line, to be honest. You probably
Martin Keown. I played with him at Leicester, and I remember I'd had Nathan Blake was at Leicester as well, and me and him had nearly got into a scrap in training, and he'd have killed me. Nathan Blake would, but Martin Keown was in the dressing room afterwards, trying to tell me that I had to be much calmer on the field and not lose my mind. And of all the people in football to be telling me that.
Yeah, okay. Do as I say, not as I do. Fair enough. Now, what do you think now when you hear in the winter of 1999, you were transferred for a then club record fee of £3 million to Derby County, making you the 4th most expensive teenager in British football history?
It's a bit weird, isn't it? Very weird. It was at the time there'd been rumblings. I'd been injured, and I'd broke my foot, and that kind of like held up a transfer. But it was either Derby or Arsenal that I was going to be going to, and at the time, obviously, you would have preferred to have gone to Arsenal than
when you
Derby.
say at the time, do you mean at any time?
Any time.
Probably, yeah. But it was literally, I got a phone call from Adrian Heath on the Sunday saying, hey, you're going to Derby tomorrow for your medical. You're going to go and sign for them. And there wasn't sort of like, it wasn't a time when you would have said, no, I'm not going. I'm only going to Arsenal or not going at all kind of thing. The club needed the money. I wasn't really given an option in where I was going. That was the highest bid, and you were off. So that was the way that it was going to be. And so I wasn't unhappy to be going to Derby. It was the Premier League, and my wages were going to go significantly up. And Derby had finished 8th in the Premier League the year before. So it was an exciting move. And it was being made clear to me that United weren't, they wanted me out. So it was the situation as it was, really. So it was exciting and disappointing. Is the best way to describe it, I guess.
I was just thinking, what do you think 3 million equates to these days? Because that was 1999 and 3 million was a lot of money. We're thinking like 15 million, something like that.
I was thinking if it's 4th most expensive teenager, so you'd now have to look at who that current fourth most expensive teenager is, and that is what it equates to.
Yeah,
madness. And Arsenal might have even paid more for you, to be fair.
Well, I think Derby outbid him at the time. I think it was one. I think Arsenal had bid 1.5 and Derby had bid 1.8, and it was rising to 3 million with appearances and stuff like that. So I think United wanted basically as much cash as they could.
So with appearances, we now know that it was 1.8.
There you go.
It's no need for that. He'll be off soon. Oh dear. So your Derby career, do you want to just run us through it?
Yeah, I mean it didn't start off well. We got beat 1-0. So I'd been injured the whole of the season at United. I'd broken my foot. I'd been out for like about 8 weeks, I think it was. Came back and we were playing Crewe on the Saturday, and I trained on the Thursday for the first time, thinking I'd just be with the fitness coaches and like the physio. And I was like training with the first team. Did the same on Friday and came on against Crewe for like 20 minutes on the Saturday. Then got the phone call on the Sunday saying you're going to Derby. So then I trained that week, did my medical, and then started against Tottenham the following Saturday, having, like a week's training. And I wasn't ready. Played an hour. We got beat 1-0. And then I broke my foot again 2 weeks later at home against Chelsea and missed the rest of the season. And that kind of like set me up for my time at Derby, where it was just up and down. I never really got going. And Jim Smith was dead old school, dead aggressive, and all the managers at Sheffield had been really good with me, and then Jim Smith was like the other way. And it was just a stop-start time at Derby for a couple of years. John Gregory came in, and all of a sudden it all fell into place for a little while, and then I ended up getting sold not long after that. So it was. There was good times at Derby, but there was a lot of tough times as well, really.
And didn't you nearly re-sign for the Blades under Neil Warnock?
Yeah, that was a weird one. I think I told you this before, where I'd gone up, I'd done my medical, agreed wages, everything was done. And it was at the end of January in the year that the transfer window came in. And so I'd agreed everything, gone up. This was on like the Tuesday, and Sheffield were playing Derby at Derby that Tuesday night. So I had my medical and then came back. It was the coldest night in the world for the game. There was snow everywhere. So I actually got delayed because there was snow on the hills coming down from the hospitals in Sheffield. So I got to that game, and then I was due to go up on the Wednesday to sign, and spoke to Warnock, and he said, look, we're playing Norwich on Saturday, so let's leave it. I will get you up on the following Sunday or Monday, and you can sign then. So I was like, all right, fair enough. At the time, I think Norwich were top, Sheffield were second, and so I didn't want to rock the boat. I could understand that. Anyway, Sunday came, tried calling him, didn't pick up. Tried calling him in the afternoon, didn't pick up. Tried him on the night, didn't pick up. Then I got a phone call from my agent saying, look, it's deadline day on Tuesday. Leicester want to sign you. They're in the Premier League. Have you got hold of Neil? So I said, no. And he said, right, well, we should probably go and check out Leicester and see what's what, because they want to do a thorough medical and we have to rush it through. So I went to Leicester on the Monday, called, left a voicemail, said, this is what's happening, but, I don't want to do it. I want to come to United. Couldn't get hold of him. Deadline day was Tuesday, and ended up saying, look, I'm on my way. What's happening? Couldn't get hold of him. Anyway, wound up signing for Leicester. And then on the Wednesday, he came out in all the newspapers saying he calls himself a blade. He's a disgrace. His dad would be appalled. And we didn't read it all. He was coming to United and he's let us down. So, it was a very weird one from Neil. But yeah, that was another disappointing one, really. I would have loved to come back.
And we'd have loved to have you as well.
Can I just say, like, Lee, obviously it's great when you said, we've chatted before, this is what Lee's referencing, and last time we did chat, I remember you said, Hal, I really like you. I really love the questions you're asking. You're fantastic. Today, I seem to have only asked questions where you say, yeah, so that was another disappointing one. Sorry.
Nah, man, that was, at the time, it was really exciting to be coming back. It had been on the cards for a good while, and I was really excited to come to Sheffield. They were in a good spot. They were competing. They were going to try and go up, and everything was set for it to be a real good season. And, you know, all my mates were in Sheffield, so I really wanted to come back. So it was a bit of a heartbreaker to not come back. And then for Neil to go and say that, I remember like the next time Leicester got relegated and we played United the next year at Bramall Lane, and I got booed by all the fans and because I was a traitor. And that was like a little bit of a heartbreaker because I'd wanted to come back so much, and you know it was all disappointing. But the ringleaders to all the booing were basically all my pals in the stand who'd run down and were calling me scum. So it was good banter.
Fantastic. At least you can tell the Sheffield United fans now that you weren't a traitor. You wanted to come back and to blame Neil Warnock.
Any opportunity to blame.
Yeah. Have you spoken to Neil since?
I haven't. No, I mean, my dad was assistant manager with him at Scarborough, and he didn't really see eye to eye with him then. So my dad wasn't overly happy that I was coming back to play for Neil at the time. So when it all kind of shook out the way that it did, my dad was like, "Oh yeah, it's Warnock all over. I knew he was going to do this."
Well, we've got a little surprise for you tonight.
He's been sat in Hal's house all this time.
He's sweating so much. There's just a Sudocrem stain on my sofa as he stands up.
Oh, can we even carry on this chat after that comment? Jeez. So let's move on to the rest of your career, mate. So do you want to sum it up?
I went to Yeovil and was lucky enough to play at Wembley the year that Wembley opened. Got to the playoff final. We beat Forest 5-2 at Forest.
Amazing.
To get to the final, that was a hell of a night. And you know, Wembley didn't turn out the way that we wanted to, but that was a brilliant night in the career. Got promoted into the league with Burton under Nigel Clough. That was a hell of a year, just brilliant surprise at the end of my career where I was kind of like hanging on, and so that was brilliant. And yeah, I enjoyed my career overall, but you know, from where it was as a young teenager to where it went was obviously a little bit frustrating, but I wouldn't change any of it. I had a brilliant time and had real good fun all the way through.
Would you say that the reason why your career didn't go as you planned was because of all the injuries?
Yeah, I think I got injured at bad times, really. And also the transfers, you know, moving to Derby at that time, Derby weren't a good club to go to at that time. You know, they were just tanking a little bit. Leicester, when I signed there, that one, they were going to get relegated, and they had all the old guard that they needed to get rid of, Matty Elliott and Guppy, and that it was like it wasn't good times to be moving on to the clubs that I went to. So it was a bit, you can't predict the future, but they were tough moves at the time. Brilliant clubs, but you know, so if you'd have asked anybody to sign for Derby last year, it was a bad time to go there, wasn't it? You know, so that was just how it went. But like I say, you know, you can't predict the injuries, and I had a brilliant time. I'm really lucky to have done what I did and had the career that I had. So I wouldn't change any of it for the world, you know.
Yeah, and you've got into coaching now. So how's that gone?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I started off in the academy at Derby after I finished when Cloughie was the manager there, and he was good enough to invite me in and let me coach in the academy there. And then I realised pretty quickly that it's cold standing on the sidelines, so I wanted to come and coach in the sun a little bit. And South Carolina's pretty warm, so I get to coach in my shorts and t-shirt over here, and my mate's my boss. So yeah, we get to do a good job over here, and I'm coaching in like youth soccer over here, and we get to have a positive impact on kids' lives over here. So I love it, and I get to be around football every day. Who could complain at that, eh?
Can't be that. Yeah, that's March 2018 you were appointed in your position of SC United Bantams. So for people not familiar, tell us about them.
So the Bantams is it's like a 3-month season in summer, and it's for the best players who are playing in like the colleges over here, who are trying to, at the end of their college life, turn professional. So the pathway in America, you don't go from school to professional. They do it the same as American football and basketball, where they have the draft. So everybody at 18 goes to college. You do 4 years of education and you play sports alongside it. And then when you're 22, the best players from there go into the draft. And that's how they pick all the players. So say Wayne Rooney finishes bottom this year with DC United, he'll have the first pick in the draft next year. And he'll try and pick the best college recruit coming out of college. And so that's how it all works. So the summer league is basically set up for us to try and get the best college players to come and play in South Carolina for 3 months. And then they're the ones that all of the professional teams can watch over summer in the best leagues and try and see who they think are the best players are from that league. So my job through the year is to try and find the best players, convince them to come to South Carolina, play for me during summer. And then hopefully we'll have guys who the following year or two will go off and play professional off the back of this. So it keeps my foot in the door of working with guys who are trying to be professional and very high level football. And then the rest of my time through the year is our kids who are trying to get into colleges and try and get them to the highest positions they can be. So it's a bit like being a youth team coach and trying to get your best players into the reserves and into the first team and try and get them placed. It's good fun. And I get to work with some really talented kids over here that have got positive futures ahead of them, you know.
So, Lee, life in the sun in South Carolina, is there a part of you that's thinking one day you will return to England or maybe go to a different part of Europe and continue that coaching journey?
So my mum and dad have just moved back to England. They lived in Portugal for 15 years. They've just moved back to be closer to my brother and his missus and nephew over in Warrington. And I managed to get back in April for the first time to see them since before COVID. And I came and I watched the United game at home against Reading, which was not a good game to come and watch, actually. They scored the equaliser in, I think it was the 92nd minute, and then conceded the losing goal in the 93rd minute. Yeah, so that was a bit of a disaster. But it kind of makes you realise, after not being home in so long, it makes you realise how much you miss home and stuff like that, being able to go watch a game. The closest team to me here is the Charlotte MLS team that have just come in, and they get like 35,000 going to watch them, and it's good, but it's boiling hot, you know, and the level isn't what it is going on and watching the championship and stuff. So you always you miss things about home, and it's always in the back of your mind. Would you consider going home? But I've got a fantastic life here. I got married last year. I'm settled. I love my job. I love where I live, and I didn't come here with a mind to going back anytime soon. I came here to kind of get myself into a good position and enjoy a career and put down roots, because I'd been a journeyman for so long over there and moving every year, every 2 years, that I really enjoy where I am right now. And I'm not really considering moving or doing anything else right now.
Do you know what? It's funny you say that. We've spoken to Nick Montgomery. We've spoken to Paul Eiffel. Obviously, we've spoken to yourself. Nobody wants to come back to this country. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
And when they do, Nick, and they do take in the Sheffield United game, they never tell us.
We were in a box that day, Hal. We were in a box.
We could have. I know. Sorry, Lee. We were looking down on you.
we could have asked Lee to come in the box, but we didn't.
Yeah, that would have been nice, actually.
Didn't even know you were there. But
did they
obviously,
take your sandwiches into the box?
they let me take my sandwiches in, but no one else.
Well, he has to sit in the corner facing the wall.
I don't know why that's so funny. Absolute nonsense. What a great way to end it. Lee Morris, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us, and good luck in the future.
I appreciate you, lads. Always enjoy following you on Twitter and stuff, and appreciate you inviting me on. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee.